wearing her worst dress for her father's guest. She didn't know he was the Alpha King she loved. It was nothing like the flowing gowns of the noblewomen she admired in the palace halls. The fabric was stiff, the color dull, and the hem frayed ever so slightly. She sighed, knowing her father would hardly notice, or worse, that his guest might find it laughable. She hated her own nervousness, the way her heart raced like a trapped bird whenever she thought of the evening ahead. Dinner with her father's mysterious guest was no ordinary occasion. Her father, a man of proud lineage and unshakable discipline, had always invited dignitaries, kings, and lords. But this time, there was a tension in the air that Alara could feel even from across the great hall. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and the palace corridors glowed with the soft golden light of countless candles. Shadows danced along the walls like ghosts, moving with a grace that made the marble floors seem alive. Alara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She could hear the distant sounds of servants arranging the dining hall, the soft clinking of silverware, and the low hum of hushed conversations. Her father's voice echoed down the corridor, firm and commanding. "Alara, come, he has arrived." Her stomach tightened. She forced a polite nod at her reflection, smoothed her hair, and descended the staircase with careful, measured steps. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the palace itself were aware of her insecurities. In the dining hall, the long table gleamed under the flickering candlelight. The guest waited at the head, his presence so commanding that the air seemed to thrum with it. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled the space with quiet authority. His dark hair fell just above eyes that seemed to see everything, piercing and intense. He wore the cloak of a king, though it was subtle and not adorned with excess gold or jewels. Power clung to him like a second skin. Alara's breath caught. There was something familiar in the way he carried himself, a presence she had once dreamed of without knowing why. Her fingers clenched at her sides, smoothing the dress once more. It was the worst dress she owned, yet somehow she felt its modesty shielded her from the overwhelming grandeur before her. Her father gestured, his prideful voice booming, "Alara, my guest, King Valar." The name landed in her ears like a song she did not recognize but had always known. King Valar. She bowed deeply, keeping her gaze respectfully lowered, but she could feel his eyes on her, weighing her, studying her in ways that made her cheeks flush. "You honor me, Lady Alara," he said, his voice deep, resonant, carrying the weight of authority yet softened by an unspoken curiosity. "Your dress, it is charming in its simplicity." Alara blinked. She had expected ridicule, perhaps indifference. Yet there was an edge to his words, a spark of amusement and something she could not place, a recognition almost. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Her father coughed, clearing his throat, and gestured toward the table. "Please sit. Dinner awaits." As Alara took her place, she could not keep her eyes from flicking toward Valar. He watched her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Each subtle movement he made was deliberate, commanding attention even in a crowded room. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced, and yet it stirred something deep inside her, a strange familiarity, like meeting someone she had once dreamed of under the stars of her childhood. The meal began, and polite conversation filled the air. Valar spoke of distant lands, of storms that tore through kingdoms, and of alliances that shifted like sand. Yet, despite his noble words, it was clear he was testing her. Every question he posed was layered with subtle challenges, as if he were probing her courage, her wit, and her heart. Alara found herself answering carefully yet honestly. She spoke of her studies, the books she loved, and the quiet joys she found in the palace gardens. Valar listened intently, occasionally offering a comment that was sharp, yet not unkind. "You have strength, Lady Alara," he said quietly, his eyes locking with hers. "Many would falter under such scrutiny." Alara felt a shiver. It was as if he could see through the walls she had built around herself. She wanted to retreat, to hide behind her simple dress and her polite words, yet something in his gaze made her hesitate. Dinner ended, and the guests were asked to leave the dining hall for a more private conversation. Alara lingered near the edge, unwilling to move yet unable to leave. Vaylor approached her, his steps silent but purposeful. "Walk with me," he said, his tone both commanding and gentle. They moved into the palace gardens, where the moonlight painted the world in silver and shadow. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of roses and night-blooming flowers. Vaylor's presence was magnetic, almost overwhelming, yet Alara felt a strange comfort in it. "You seem different than I imagined," Vaylor said, finally breaking the silence. "I expected someone fragile, easily frightened." Alara's lips pressed together. She hated how much the truth of his words stung, yet she refused to let it show. "I am no one of importance, Your Majesty," she replied softly, her voice steadier than she felt. "Perhaps that is why I find myself drawn to you," he murmured, and his words hung between them, heavy with meaning. A sudden rustle in the garden drew their attention. Shadows shifted among the trees, and for a moment both tensed. Yet it was nothing more than a night breeze carrying fallen leaves. Still, the moment lingered, charged with tension neither could explain. Alara felt her heart ache in a way she could not name. She had dreamed of a hero, a strong presence she could trust with her heart, yet here he was standing before her. Strong, distant, yet somehow familiar. And she did not know the truth, that he was the very man her heart had always recognized, the Alpha King of legend. They walked in silence for a few more moments, the night wrapping around them like a protective shroud. Vaylor stopped suddenly, turning to face her fully. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, dark, intense, and commanding, seemed to strip her bare of pretense. "Do you know what you are, Lady Alara?" he asked quietly. I am your guest's daughter," she replied with a nervous smile, trying to hide her growing tension. He shook his head, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "No, stronger, braver. You have fire in your soul, even if you hide it." Alara's pulse quickened. Fire in her soul. She had never heard such words before, and yet they resonated in a place she thought was forever locked away. Before she could respond, Vaylor took a step closer so that the moonlight glinted off his dark hair and the fine edge of his cloak. "Be careful," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Not all who see your fire wish you well. Some may wish to extinguish it." Alara swallowed, her throat dry, yet she nodded. She understood the warning, even if she did not fully understand him. Something about him, his power, his presence, his unspoken understanding, felt both dangerous and necessary. As they returned to the palace, Alara's mind raced. The dinner, the garden, the words. Every moment left her feeling unsteady yet alive. She realized that nothing in her life had prepared her for someone like him, someone who could challenge her, awaken her, and see through her carefully built walls. When she finally reached her room, she closed the door and leaned against it, trembling. Her worst dress had not embarrassed her, yet her heart was full of unfamiliar, exhilarating chaos. She could not shake the feeling that her life had changed forever, though she did not yet know why. And then she heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper carried on the wind. "Alara," her name, spoken with a voice she knew, though she could not place it. Her heart froze. It was him, King Vaylor, or was it something more? The shadows of the palace seemed to draw closer, the night deeper, the wind colder. And as she pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart, she realized she was no longer just a girl in a faded blue dress. She was the center of a story far larger than herself, a story woven with power, longing, and destiny. And she was utterly, helplessly caught. Cliffhanger. A shadow moved outside her window, silent and deliberate. Alara's breath caught. The voice whispered her name again, softer this time, a promise and a warning intertwined. She had seen the man at dinner, had felt his power, but did she truly know who he was? And more importantly, did she dare to find out, The next morning the palace awoke to the soft glow of dawn, the halls bathed in gold. Birds chirped outside, yet inside, the air felt heavy, as if the night had left its shadows lingering behind. Alara moved through the corridors with quiet steps, her mind still racing from the whispered voice she had heard. She could not forget it. King Valor, or something deeper in him that called her name like a memory she had never lived. Her father entered the hall, commanding as ever. "Alara, you will join me in the gardens. The king wishes to speak further with you." Alara froze. Speak with him? Alone? Her stomach twisted with nervous anticipation. She smoothed the faded dress again, trying to summon courage she barely felt. The last night had been strange and overwhelming, and now the weight of curiosity pulled her forward, even though a part of her whispered caution. When she reached the gardens, Valor was already there, standing beneath an ancient oak whose branches reached for the sky like darkened fingers. The sunlight caught the edges of his cloak, revealing the subtle patterns woven into it, symbols that whispered of power, of legacy, of untold magic. He turned as she approached, and for a moment time seemed to pause. "Lady Alara," he said, his deep voice calm yet edged with a hidden intensity, "you honor me with your presence." Alara bowed slightly, though her heart raced. "Your Majesty," she replied softly. She could feel the pull of his eyes upon her, as if he were trying to read her very thoughts. Valor took a step closer, but not too close. He had a way of commanding the space around him, of making every move deliberate and purposeful. "I do not wish to frighten you," he said, his gaze steady, "but there are matters that concern not only my court but yours as well." Alara tilted her head slightly, her curiosity stronger than her fear. "Matters?" she asked. "Yes," Valor replied. "Your family, your kingdom, even your life, are all in ways entangled with forces you do not yet understand." A shiver ran down her spine. She had always felt there was more in the world than what she could see. Strange whispers in the corridors, fleeting shadows at night, old stories her father told about kings and powers long lost, but she had never imagined that any of it would touch her so directly. Valor studied her carefully, as if weighing her worth, her courage, her heart. "You are not like the others," he said. "Many would bow and tremble before me, but you have fire. You do not hide from it, even when it is dangerous." Alara felt a mixture of pride and fear. She had always tried to appear polite, reserved, careful, but Valor saw through her. Somehow he understood her in ways no one else did. Why do you say that?" she asked quietly. "Because I have watched," he said, "and I have seen the strength you do not yet believe exists in yourself. You are braver than you know, Alara." Her heart skipped a beat. He knew her name. He had spoken it again, just as he had in the night. And yet there was more to him, a part of his presence that felt familiar, almost painfully so. She had dreamed of a man like him, strong and commanding, the kind of protector who could face darkness without fear. And now he stood before her. "I do not understand," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you here speaking to me? Surely there are more important matters for a king of your power." Valor's eyes darkened for a moment, and his lips pressed into a thin line. "Important matters often hide where we least expect them, and some dangers seek to strike those who are unsuspecting. You, Lady Alara, are one of those." Fear gripped her briefly, but she forced herself to stand tall. I am not afraid," she said, though her voice wavered. "Tell me what I must know." Valor studied her, the tension between them almost tangible. "You have a destiny you do not yet recognize. Your family's house carries an ancient connection to powers both human and not. There are forces at work that would see it destroyed, and to protect it, you must understand yourself and me." Alara's brow furrowed. The words sounded like a tale of legend, something out of the old stories her father told by the fire. Yet there was a weight to them, a seriousness that made her pulse quicken. "I do not know what you mean," she whispered, though her mind raced with questions. "I am just me." Valor's gaze softened slightly, and for the first time he seemed vulnerable, even human. "Perhaps that is what makes you so rare," he murmured. "You are human, yet your spirit carries the strength to face what others cannot." The air between them grew heavy, charged with tension and unspoken desire. Alara felt herself drawn to him, despite every warning her mind whispered. There was something in his presence that called to her, something she had never felt before. Yet the knowledge that he was a king, a man of immense power, made the pull dangerous. They walked along the moonlit paths of the garden, silent for a while, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the soft morning breeze. Alara felt a strange peace in the quiet, yet the tension never fully left the space between them. "You must be careful," Valor said suddenly, breaking the silence. "There are eyes watching, forces that do not wish you well." Alara turned to him, her eyes wide. What do you mean?" "There are those who would use fear to control," he explained, his voice low and serious. "And some would use love, if it exists, as a weapon." Her heart ached at his words, a mix of longing and worry that made it hard to breathe. She had never imagined that love, or the possibility of it, could be dangerous, yet here it was, tangible and frightening. Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Valor's eyes softened again, and he took a careful step closer, respecting the invisible line between them. "Because you have a heart strong enough to withstand what I cannot face alone," he said. "And because you are not afraid of seeing me as I truly am." Alara swallowed hard. His words were more than a compliment, they were a revelation. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance between them, yet something inside her cautioned restraint. "See you as you are?" she asked softly. "And what is that?" Valor hesitated, a shadow crossing his features. "A king, yes, but also a man who bears the weight of power that isolates him from those he cares for. I am not free in the ways you imagine." Alara's chest tightened. She had always dreamed of a strong protector, yet she did not expect him to carry such solitude and burden. "Then, how can I help?" she whispered. "You cannot fight my battles for me," he replied, "but your courage, your heart, they remind me of what I am fighting to protect. And perhaps they remind me that there is more to life than power and fear." They stood together in silence, the morning sun painting the garden in soft light. And in that silence, Alara felt the stirrings of something she had longed for without knowing it: connection, understanding, and the quiet pull of a heart awakening to a truth it had always sought. But just as the moment seemed serene, a sudden movement in the palace caught their attention. A servant hurried past, pale and fearful, whispering hurried words about strange sightings near the northern walls. Shadows had been seen moving, unnatural and swift. Valor's gaze sharpened and his calm demeanor shifted into vigilance. "It begins," he muttered, almost to himself. Alara felt a chill run down her spine. "Begins?" she asked. "The danger," Valor said quietly, his eyes never leaving the distant walls of the palace. "Forces are gathering that would seek to harm those I care for, including you." Her heart raced. She had always thought the tales of magic and darkness were distant stories, nothing that could touch her. Yet here it was, real and immediate, and she was standing in its path. Valor turned toward her then, his expression unreadable but serious. "You must understand, Alara, nothing will ever be the same again." She nodded, unable to speak, feeling the weight of his words settle into her chest like a stone. And in that moment, she realized that her life, her heart, and her very future were now entwined with the man before her. A man of immense power, secrecy, and undeniable pull. As the sun climbed higher, casting light on the palace gardens, Alara knew one thing clearly: she could not turn back, and neither could Valor. Cliffhanger. As they prepared to return to the palace, a sudden shadow flitted across the walls, faster than any human could move. Valor's eyes darkened and he whispered almost to himself, "They are coming, and soon nothing will protect her but me." The northern woods stretched endlessly before Alara, dark and foreboding. Mist curled between the ancient trees, and the ground was uneven, tangled with roots that seemed to reach for her feet. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the forest itself resisted her presence. Her heart pounded, not just from the effort of walking, but from the knowledge that danger had found them. King Valor walked ahead of her, his cloak brushing the forest floor. He moved with a predator's grace, silent, watchful, every sense alert. Even in the dim light, his presence was commanding, almost unnatural. Alara could feel the weight of his gaze on her from time to time, protective and intense, and it both reassured and unsettled her. "This forest, it is alive," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I feel watched." Valor glanced back at her, his expression serious. "You are watched, not by eyes like ours, but by forces older than kingdoms, forces that seek what we carry." Alara shivered. She had heard tales of the cursed northern woods, stories her father dismissed as fairy tales. But now, walking beneath the twisted branches, she could feel the truth of those warnings. Shadows moved in the corners of her vision, strange shapes that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. "Why are we here?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why not stay in the palace where it is safe?" Valor's gaze darkened. "Because the threat will find us, no matter the walls. Here in the forest we can face it on our terms." Alara swallowed, though fear churned in her stomach. She did not fully understand what she was facing, but one thing was clear. Valor was not merely a king. He was a force unto himself, and yet he had chosen to share this danger with her. As they moved deeper into the woods, the air grew colder, and a faint, unnatural wind whispered through the trees. Alara clutched her cloak tighter, feeling the brush of leaves against her skin like a warning. Then she saw it, a flicker of movement among the trees, fast and deliberate. Valor halted instantly, his hand reaching for hers. "Stay close," he commanded. Alara obeyed, heart pounding. They walked in silence, the forest pressing in around them. Then from the shadows came a sudden sharp sound, a branch snapping underfoot. Both froze. "Show yourself," Valor called, his voice low and steady, carrying authority that seemed to command the very forest. From the darkness, a figure emerged, cloaked and hooded, moving with unnatural speed. Its eyes glowed faintly, and a chill swept through the air as it approached. Alara's breath caught. She had never seen anything like it, and her instinct screamed to flee. But Valor remained calm, his stance firm and commanding. "Leave," he said, voice like steel, but the figure did not move. Alara could feel her own fear rising, but she also felt something else, something powerful and protective radiating from Valor. It was a warmth that cut through the cold and the terror, a silent promise that he would not let harm come to her. The figure lunged, swift and silent, and Valor moved like a shadow himself, intercepting it with precision. A clash echoed through the trees, sparks of unseen magic lighting the night. Alara gasped, barely able to process what she was seeing. This was no ordinary threat. These were forces that should not exist in the mortal world, and Valor faced them with skill and power that left her awestruck. "You must be brave," he said without looking at her, deflecting another strike. "Do not falter. Trust yourself as I trust you." Alara nodded, though her hands shook. She could not fight like him, but she could move, stay alert, and follow his instructions. The danger pressed in around them, yet something in the way Valor fought, in the way he protected her, stirred a deep admiration and longing within her. Minutes, or perhaps hours, passed in a blur of movement, shadow, and whispered magic. Finally, the figure retreated, vanishing into the mist as silently as it had appeared. Valor's breathing was heavy, his cloak torn slightly at the edges, but he remained standing unbowed. "You did well," he said, finally turning to her. His eyes were intense, softer now, filled with something like relief. Not many would have stayed. Alara felt her chest swell with both pride and fear. I wanted to help," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I wanted to be strong like you." Valor's gaze softened. "You are strong," he said quietly. Stronger than you realize. Strength does not come from fighting alone. It comes from the courage to face the unknown, to stay when others would flee. For a moment the world seemed still. The mist, the trees, the lingering shadows, they faded into the background as Alara looked at him, truly looked at him. She saw the weight he carried, the loneliness hidden behind his power, and the quiet longing for someone who could understand him. I have always dreamed of someone like you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Vaylor's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his features. Dreamed of me? He asked, incredulous, yet there was a softness in his tone that surprised even him. Yes, she admitted. Someone strong, someone who could protect and guide, yet see me for who I am. I think I always knew you, even before I met you. His breath caught. For a moment, Vaylor's mask slipped, revealing the man beneath the king, the man who had carried centuries of power, isolation, and duty. He took a careful step closer, and Alara could feel the heat of his presence, the magnetic pull she had felt from the moment they met. You knew me?" he asked, voice low, almost a whisper. I think I did," she said. Her heart pounded. "I have dreamed of someone like you long before you came here." Vaylor's hand hovered near hers, uncertain yet drawn by the invisible thread connecting them. This is dangerous," he murmured. "I cannot let emotions cloud judgment, not here, not now." Alara nodded, though a part of her wanted to close the distance, to reach for him, to let the longing between them breathe freely. Yet she understood his caution. He carried a burden, and that burden was not hers to solve, yet not entirely separate from her either. They continued through the woods, the tension between them unspoken but undeniable. The shadows seemed less menacing now, not because the danger had passed, but because they faced it together. Eventually, they reached a clearing where a small stream reflected the pale light of the moon, untouched by the forest's dark reach. Vaylor paused, turning to her fully. "Listen," he said, voice quiet but firm. "I have a secret, one I cannot hide from you any longer." Alara's heart skipped a beat. She had guessed there was more to him than even the tales whispered in the palace. "A secret?" she asked. "Yes," he said. His dark eyes bore into hers, full of gravity. "I am not merely a king. I am the Alpha King of the Northern Realms, the protector of powers both mortal and beyond. My life, my duty, everything I am, has been shaped by forces you cannot yet imagine." Alara staggered back slightly, her mind racing. The man she had felt drawn to, the one who had haunted her dreams, the one who had fought by her side in the forest, he was the Alpha King. The stories, the legends, the whispered warnings, they all converged in him. You are him?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Vaylor nodded. "I am, and I could not tell you before. The truth carries danger. But now you must know, because the forces that hunt us will not stop. And you are at the center of this as much as I am." Alara felt a mix of awe and fear, her chest tightening. The man she had longed for was real, powerful, and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Yet beneath the weight of his crown, beneath the shadows of duty and destiny, she saw something else: vulnerability, a need for trust, and a longing that mirrored her own. I don't know if I am ready," she admitted, "but I do not want to run either." Vaylor's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Then we face it together," he said, "no matter what comes." For a fleeting moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The night was still, the mist curling lazily around their feet. And in that moment, Alara felt something shift deep within her, a courage she had never known, a longing she could no longer deny, and a bond with Vaylor that was undeniable, dangerous, and intoxicating. But just as hope seemed to settle, a distant howl pierced the night. Shadows deepened, the wind carried an unnatural chill, and Alara realized with a shiver that the danger was far from over. Vaylor's eyes darkened. "They are coming," he whispered, his hand brushing against hers, not touching, yet close enough to ignite a spark of fear and longing. And soon, Nothing will protect us but each other. Alara's heart raced as the mist thickened around them. She had faced the unknown before, but never with a truth so powerful, so alive, so terrifying. And yet she knew she would not run. Not from him, not from destiny, not from the storm that awaited. The forest seemed to close in, shadows twisting like living things. And in that darkness, the bond between them, fragile yet unbreakable, became the only light she could hold onto. Cliffhanger, a dark figure emerged from the mist, larger and more menacing than before. Its eyes glowed with unnatural fire, and Vaylor's body tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for a hidden power. "Hold on, Alara," he commanded, voice low and urgent. This is only the beginning. The forest was alive with shadows, swirling mist, and the echo of the unseen threat that had pursued them for days. Alara's heart beat in her chest like a drum, a rhythm of fear, courage, and anticipation. She clutched the edge of her cloak tightly, her eyes following Vaylor as he moved with the precision of a predator, yet his gaze never left hers for long. "The curse is stronger here," Vaylor said quietly, his voice almost lost in the whispering wind. "It feeds on fear, doubt, and hesitation. You must trust yourself and me." Alara nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. The shadows in the forest seemed to twist with every step they took, dark tendrils reaching for them, threatening to pull them into the unknown. But she did not turn back. She could not. Not when Vaylor's presence was a shield, a guiding force, and something more, something that stirred her heart like no one ever had. They reached the heart of the cursed woods, where the air was thick, heavy with ancient magic. The ground was cracked and darkened, as though the forest itself had bled centuries ago. A circle of stones, carved with unknown symbols, pulsed faintly with an eerie light. Vaylor paused at the edge, his expression tense, his jaw set in determination. "This is where it begins," he said. "The source of the curse. We face it together, or it will consume everything we care about." Alara took a deep breath. "Then we face it together," she echoed, her voice trembling yet firm. The mist thickened, and from its swirling folds emerged a figure, larger than any human, cloaked in shadows, with eyes like burning embers. Its presence was suffocating, a pressure that weighed on Alara's chest and made her knees weak. Vaylor stepped forward, his cloak billowing around him like the wings of a dark angel. "Stay behind me," he commanded, though his hand brushed against hers as if drawing strength from her courage. "Do not falter." Alara did not move. She felt the pull of fear, but she also felt the bond between them, strong and unspoken. She stepped closer, meeting the shadowed figure with a steadiness she did not fully feel, but that she knew she could hold. "You are stronger than you know," Vaylor murmured. "Even now." The shadow figure lunged, moving faster than the eye could follow. Vaylor intercepted it, his movements precise and fluid, a combination of strength and ancient magic. Sparks of light and shadow collided, illuminating the misty forest in flashes of power. Alara watched, awestruck, as the man she had longed for fought not just with physical strength, but with a command of forces she could scarcely comprehend. "Alara," Vaylor called suddenly, "now you must hold the circle." The stones pulsed with brighter light, and Alara stepped forward instinctively, placing her hands upon the carved symbols. She felt energy surge through her, unfamiliar but strangely comforting. It was as though the forest itself acknowledged her courage, her presence, and her connection to Vaylor. The shadow recoiled, hissing, its form wavering. "You cannot hold it," it rasped. "You are human, weak." "I am not weak," Alara said aloud, her voice trembling but fierce. "I am brave enough to fight for what I love, for him." The words seemed to have power. The stones beneath her hands glowed brighter, and a protective light formed a barrier around Vaylor and herself. The shadow shrieked, recoiling further, unable to penetrate the force of their combined will. Vaylor moved beside her, his hand finding hers. "We are stronger together," he said, his voice low, charged with emotion. "Trust me, trust us." Alara felt a rush of warmth at his touch, a connection that was more than physical. It was a bond of hearts, courage, and destiny intertwined. She squeezed his hand, and the energy from the stones surged stronger, pushing the shadow back, forcing it to waver and falter. "You see," Valor said, his eyes burning with both power and tenderness, "you were never alone in this. I am with you." The shadow let out a final, desperate shriek before dissipating into mist, leaving the clearing still and quiet. The stones glowed faintly, their light slowly fading as the curse loosened its grip on the forest. Alara dropped to her knees, exhausted but triumphant, and Valor knelt beside her. "You were magnificent," he said softly, "more than I could have hoped." Alara looked up at him, her chest heaving, her eyes glistening with tears of relief and awe. I could not have done it without you," she admitted. Valor shook his head gently. "No, it was never about doing it alone. It was about trust, courage, and heart. You have all three, Alara, all three in abundance." The wind whispered through the trees, carrying away the last remnants of darkness. For a moment all was quiet, and the forest seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Alara and Valor remained kneeling, hands still intertwined, hearts still racing from the encounter. Then slowly, Valor lifted her to her feet. "Come with me," he said, his voice soft yet commanding. They walked back toward the edge of the woods, the first light of dawn breaking through the mist, painting the world in soft hues of gold and silver. "Alara," Valor said suddenly, stopping and turning to face her fully, "I have kept so much from you. My title, my legacy, the weight I carry. But now, after everything, I cannot hide it anymore. I trust you." Alara felt her heart swell. She had dreamed of this moment, longed for it in ways she could never fully explain. "I trust you too," she said, her voice steady, full of certainty. "And I care for you, more than I ever imagined." Valor's eyes softened, the fire of his power mingling with vulnerability. He took her hands in his, holding them as though they were the most precious treasure in the world. "Then we face what comes next together," he said. They emerged from the forest, the palace visible in the distance. Guards had gathered, their faces filled with relief and curiosity. Word had spread of the danger, yet no one dared approach too closely, knowing the presence of the Alpha King and the mortal who had stood by him. Inside the palace, Valor addressed the court, revealing the threat and the bravery of Alara. Murmurs spread, admiration for her courage growing with each word. Yet Valor's eyes remained only on her, a silent promise of protection, respect, and unspoken affection. That evening, as the sun set, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, Valor and Alara stood together on the balcony, overlooking the kingdom they had fought to protect. The wind carried the scent of flowers and the distant forest, and for the first time Alara felt at peace, yet aware that their journey was far from over. "I never imagined," she began, her voice soft. Valor turned to her, his dark eyes full of warmth and unspoken emotion. "What? That I could be part of something so vast," she said, "dangerous, magical, and yet beautiful, and that I would find someone who sees me truly." Valor's lips curved into a faint smile. "You have changed everything," he said. "Not just for yourself, but for me, for this kingdom, for the world that is ours to protect." Alara reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "Then we continue," she said, "together, no matter what comes." "Yes," Valor agreed, his voice low and firm, "together." For a moment they stood in silence, letting the peace of the evening wash over them. The stars began to emerge, one by one, as if blessing the bond they had forged. And though the shadow of danger still lingered somewhere in the distant north, neither of them feared it. They had faced darkness, confronted power, and discovered trust and courage within themselves and each other. I never thought I could feel this way," Alara said quietly. "So safe, so seen." Valor lifted her chin gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You were always brave, Alara. You just needed to see yourself as I do." A soft smile spread across her face, her heart full. For the first time, she felt that the world, with all its shadows and storms, could be met with courage, love, and hope. And she knew that with Valor by her side, she could face anything. The wind whispered again, carrying a hint of distant danger, a reminder that life was never truly free of challenges. But this time, the whisper did not bring fear. It brought determination. Together, Valor and Alara turned toward the horizon, the golden light of dawn reflecting in their eyes. The kingdom was theirs to protect, their bond stronger than any shadow, their hearts united in a love born of courage, trust, and destiny. And in the quiet morning, as the palace stirred to life, a single truth shone brighter than any star. The Alpha King and the mortal he loved were no longer separate worlds. They were one. Cliffhanger closing hook. Far beyond the palace walls, the northern wind carried a soft, ominous hum, another power stirring in the distance. Valor tightened his hand around Alara's. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it as one." Alara nodded, heart steady. The story of darkness, courage, and love was far from over, but together they were unstoppable.